it's one of the really cool things at Prairie Hockey Academy, and in fact, lots of academies across Western Canada, that they're developing leaders on and off the ice. And as we talked to Todd Reynolds today, the player certified agent for NHL players, he emphasized the fact that it's got to be a slow process. It's not just, you've got the talent. You've also got to have great character and be a great leader. And that's some of the important things that you're going to be able to listen to on today's episode.
Well, for us, it's all about development. Look, it's not a race. We're not in a hurry to move our players through the system. We're seeing players making their NHL debuts, at 25, 26, 27.
Welcome to the Win All Day, Everyday podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. My name is Barrett Kropp. I'm the host of today's show. I'm also the general manager at Prairie Hockey Academy, and I'm really excited to have today on our show Todd Reynolds. He's a certified NHL player agent. He's teamed up with Rich Winter. The two of them are a dynamic duo with Raze Sports, and they've had a huge roster of players in their stable over the years. Guys like Mike Fisher and the Primo brothers, and current guys like Zach Hyman and Tyler Bertuzzi, and just the list goes on. They are working with the top players in the game today, and there's some really good advice that we're going to be asking Todd for, and I look forward to the episode. So Todd, what is the pathway to and through junior hockey? It's really complicated these days, and how would you say that an agent can help a young player in this new paradigm?
Well, I think families are leaning on, or they're drawing on the experience that agents have had. I mean, assuming that the agent has been in the industry for a long time, they've been through these various scenarios, multiple times with multiple clients over the years. So your experience of watching players in the past navigate these waters, the people, the coaches and managers that you entrust your players to, ensuring that they're going to treat the players well, that they're going to be patient with the players, that they're trustworthy, essentially, Barrett. It's a huge part of the process is the people that you're involved with, the people that you're playing for, and their reputations.
Yeah, for sure. And, as we talked earlier, like the landscape for junior hockey, especially right now, has really changed, right? Like with some of the rogue leagues like the BCHL and some of those Alberta teams joining them. And there's been a lot of parents that, have been on our show and asking us questions about like what are some trends, I guess, or what are some pathways that you're seeing now post-COVID for players to kind of get from, obviously, you're dealing with NHL level players, but you've got some partnerships with other agencies like Trailblazers and whatnot that help the minor hockey level. What are some things that you guys are seeing in your industry that would help parents kind of navigate post-COVID what their athletes should be doing?
Well, for us, it's all about development, really. That's our emphasis is development. So if we're talking about young players and growth, look, it's not a race. We're not in a hurry to move our players through the system and get to the NHL. We're seeing players making their NHL debuts at 25, 26, 27 right now. I mean, currently there's a few players that have just scored their first goals in the National Hockey League in the last month.
Right.
And they're 26 or 27 years old. So, when you illustrate that to families, to players, they understand that there's quite a bit of time between, exiting major junior, for instance, at 20 and playing in the National Hockey League. So why are we in such a hurry? I think that's important. So it's about development. It's about going somewhere where you will get coaching, you will get off ice development, you'll get video work, you'll be as mature and ready to step into the pro game and have success as you can possibly be. And if that's 23, 24, 25, then so be it.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? Like I've got the opportunity right now to coach the U15 preps, and if that's their draft year right now, and so many of them are just in that panic mode of like, which agent should I be going with, and how should I? What's the next step? Should I be talking to this team? And I love that fact that you're just saying, like, wait, there's no hurry in this process. It's going to take a long time for you to get to that level. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it's a really important step for these young guys.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it can. Sorry, Barrett. It can seem like a bit of a race, and for years we've all heard the marathon analogy in hockey used. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and that is true. And I think when you're 15 or 16, you can feel like this is the finish line, and you're looking left and looking right, and you're seeing people ahead of you, and you get concerned. And you're at the fourth or fifth mile marker of a marathon at that point. So it's just really not even relevant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good reminder, even as a coach, for me to keep that in mind, and the other coaches that we mentor at Prairie Hockey Academy, just to keep that mindset, right? Like we're just wrapping up, some of our mid-season stuff, going into playoffs here. But sometimes even in a season, you think like we got to speed through things, but it is about that long-term development, right? It's a real critical piece.
Yeah.
And it's good to be reminded of that. You've been in the industry for a long time. And prior to you being with Raze Sports, you and your dad had Uptown Sports Management that's now been acquired by Raze, and you're now the president there with Raze Sports. What are some things that you have seen in the industry change over your career, like in terms of, I think back to the late 80s, early 90s, and it was just, it was maybe a rough and tumble and not really much care about development of character. But now we're seeing it from the other side, and we're saying a lot of teams actually want leaders. They're looking for a talented player that's a great leader. Is that true that you're seeing that in your industry?
We are. I mean, we've personally always focused on that, Barrett, at Uptown and now at Raze. In our experience, those players have reached their ceiling, if you will, or even broken through it and overachieved. And what I mean by that, just to be clear, is the player who is grounded, is patient with the process, is a good teammate, works hard, all of those things, sort of a high intangible type of player. Those end up becoming the players that have the longest career, the sort of smoothest sailing career, if you will. They don't get too high or too low. I know it sounds cliche, but they just continue to go to the office every day and work. They're good teammates. Management wants those players around for an extra year or two on the back end of their career because they're such good leaders and mentors for younger players. So, there's, I think, certainly for us, there's been an emphasis on that clearly, and teams are realizing that that's just better business for them, right. To less headaches, less maintenance, if you will, with those types of players.
Yeah. And at Prairie Hockey, we talk about that all the time, right? Like we want to make sure we're developing leaders on and off the ice. And I know that you guys have had a stable full of great athletes over the years, right? From, Mike Fisher all the way through now to guys like Zach Hyman and Bertuzzi that are great leaders on and off the ice in their community. And that's great to see that you guys keep that emphasis, and you're not sort of just chasing the dollars. You're chasing great men that are character, upstanding citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Barrett. I appreciate that. That's kind. And listen, I mean, selfishly, it makes it enjoyable for us, right? It makes it a lot, it's a lot more fun for us working with those types of high character young men. I mean, they're elite athletes, yes, but Zach Hyman is as grounded and down to earth as he was when I met him at 16. Nothing has changed, and same with Tyler Bertuzzi and on and on. So yeah, it's really been quite enjoyable for us to work with those kinds of young men.
Yeah, that's great to see. And yeah, I even think of a guy like Giordano, right? A guy that's sort of a late bloomer, but he's worked his way through the system in longevity because he's just he's a brilliant guy on the ice. He was up for the Norris at one point and actually maybe even won it. But in terms of his character off the ice, I mean, that's a guy that teams want to have around. And when I think back to him coming out of junior and all that other stuff, he was one of those glue guys back then. Like nothing has changed with him.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, we represent players that were, elite all the way along and first round picks, and entered the NHL at a young age, and sort of took that path that most young players would love to follow. But we also represent players in the NHL who were never drafted at any level,
Right.
and toiled in the minors, if you will, right,
Yep.
for years, and worked, and eventually got their opportunity. There's just so many different routes, pathways to reach the National Hockey League. And maybe it's not the NHL, I mean, it's not going to be for a lot of players, but there's
Yep.
so many wonderful pro opportunities out there, for these young players. Hockey can enrich your life, in many ways, and can provide opportunities to travel and see the world, and new places, and so on. So yeah, it's there's so many wonderful opportunities out there for players. I think they focus, young players obviously focus on the NHL because that's the dream.
Right. Yeah. Let's get into the weeds here a little bit and just talk about the meat and potatoes of agency and sport agency. I get the question often from parents is, Barrett, what is the difference between an agent and an advisor? Can you help us kind of differentiate that?
Certainly. So an advisor would be more of a college connotation. It would be more of an NCAA, um, keeping your eligibility intact. I mean, obviously, you can't have an agent. I don't know if all of your listeners would know that or not, but if you're a college player, you cannot have an agent. You cannot have any sort of a futures type of relationship. I mean, typically, an agent gets paid when the player gets paid.
Right.
So when you're working with a younger player as a hockey agent, you're not getting paid. You're putting in time, and hopefully together you reach your goals of the player signing a pro contract and having a long NHL career, and then the agent gets paid. In the case of an advisor athlete relationship, it's more about amateurism. It's more about advising a player about possibly which junior A team to play for, which college to focus on or commit to, those kinds of matters, I would say. In both roles, you're advocating for a player, helping them, advising them, and their parents in a lot of cases. But certainly, an advisor would refer to a college-bound player.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not wanting to, muddy the agency waters here with this next question, but one thing that we do get a lot of our parents asking us about, because it seems like at every big showcase that we're going to or tournament that our athletes are competing at, is there seems to be a lot of advisors that are out there with the business card, and they want to charge a fee. Hey, I'll get your son a tryout. You just give me a retainer of $3,000 for the year, and I'll get him 5 tryouts. What's your comment on that, or what's your thoughts on that? Is that something that parents should be pursuing, or is there just maybe a pumping of the brakes and just let the scouts do their job to find your son and daughter?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit of both, Barrett. There is a place for that kind of service in some cases, and I think that there can be some benefit to the families. Look at all of the fees and people in the world helping a player who can't play. You're not going to get any results, right? So, you can't just throw money at it essentially and expect to have a lineup of schools there to recruit your son.
Right.
So I think there's a healthy balance there between what kind of player, skill set, talent are we dealing with, and maybe there just needs to be a few tweaks and a few phone calls made, and that kind of thing to open some doors, but ultimately the player has to do it.
Right.
So, the player has to play. No agent in the world is going to get you a full scholarship to Northeastern if you can't play.
Right.
So, and no one, at Northeastern is going to get a NHL contract offer if they can't play at that level.
Right.
So, I think there is there is a place for it. Families shouldn't be making that decision out of pressure or out of fear that, gee, if we don't do this, we're short selling, our son or daughter. I think it should be more like, hey, we recognize that there's some opportunity here. We might need some help navigating the waters. And there is I think a place for that kind of service. I would almost say in moderation.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's a good position for sure. And I think that's some of the advice that we've provided as well from our end to people that ask is you got to make sure at the end of the day, your son or daughter has to be able to perform, and they'll get noticed. There's enough scouts out there. Everyone seems to have a business card or a jacket from one team or another when you're at these arenas.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. And listen, I mean, just who are we talking about? So what is their experience in the industry? What about the relationships and examples of players that they've moved through the system in the past? I think credibility would be an important question. For families to make sure that they understand that, hey, we're in good hands here. These people are honest. They're not overselling us.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely important for sure, because there are some shady characters in every industry, right? And you want to make sure that you're following through with people that are, long tenured in the industry, but also are willing to spend some time, walking and navigating through the steps.
That's right.
Walk us through what, let's just hypothetically say, we're coming up to the Bantam draft for the Western Hockey League. There's 2 or 3 kids that you're representing into that because they're probably going to be top 5 picks. What does it look like for Raze Sports and yourself to have that player as, one of them is in your stable? And what does it look like in their journey to pro? Like what do you guys actually provide as an agent?
Well, that's a big question, and one that is actually difficult to answer, in that we're doing so many different things depending where a player is in their career, right? So, the services that we're providing and for a player at 16, 17, 18 is quite different than like you say, Mark Giordano, who's 40. So. Certainly for younger players, Barrett, it's advising. It's I guess helping the family avoid the potholes, and ensuring as best as you can that they're in good hands. They're at a good program. They have a history of treating the players well, and they're patient in the development process, because a team can get excited about a young player based on his past, bring him in. It doesn't go well. The first 10, 15, 20 games, everybody's saying, gee, this is not, how we drew it up.
Right.
And what will that team do in those, in that situation? Will they be patient? Will they work with the player? Will they spend time with him and encourage him? Maybe there's something going on off the ice. Maybe there's issues, real issues, life issues happening. And I think some programs are quick to kick the player to the curb, and other programs are not. And that's important, for an agent or an advisor to have an idea of, just the track record for these clubs. So, development, just to get back to the question, development's a huge point for us, with younger players, and that can involve facilitating skating coaches, shooting coaches, just doing some mental prep work, rehab from injuries. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that go into ensuring that an elite athlete is functioning, in a high performance type of fashion.
Right.
So, that's on the younger players. As you move on, you become a pro and you become an NHL player, or you're playing in Europe. I mean, there's tax issues. There's sort of real life. There's cross border issues. There's just like a myriad of things that we do when players are pros. Obviously, strategizing for their career and term and dollars when it comes to contracts and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not it's not a thing that you would hurry up through, right? Like you're in it for the long game. When we're with that athlete that's coming into a bantam draft, you're not getting anything out of them until they actually sign that contract in the NHL. And that's going to be another 5 years down the road. So there's a lot of work that has to be put in, come alongside, making sure their brand is aligned with your brand, making sure that they're doing the right things for their development. And then, like you said, once they're in the NHL, I'm not sure if our listeners would know this, but down in the States, every state that there is an NHL team you have to file a separate income tax in that state based on number of performances. So it's not just a matter of downloading Intuit on your computer and filing your taxes in February. It's an incredibly complicated procedure for an athlete in any sport. And I think that's one of the important things that agents help navigate that, right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah, it is. And you can't go to the mall, to H&R Block, the little pop-up stand in the center of the mall, to do your taxes when you're an NHL player. And just, to go back to the patience thing, I think that's really important when families are making a choice to choose an agent, is just to make sure that agent doesn't need, to get paid in the next 6 months. And what I mean by that is, if someone's son is in college and he's a sophomore and he's not quite ready to leave college and sign an NHL contract, he shouldn't have the agent, coercing him or pushing him to sign. And, I've been down that road with so many players over the years where they've been patient and said no, 1 or 2 years in a row. And, I've been fine with it. I've actually encouraged them to do that. And, they'll say, gee, Todd, I'm shocked that you don't want me to sign, you're not pushing me to sign.
Right.
Because, you've been working with me for 6 years, and you haven't been paid. And, our response is that, hey, it's always what's best for you. It's always about the player first, even if it's not best for us.
Right.
And secondly, we don't need the money. We don't need to be paid. And I don't mean to say that flippantly, but we're in a good position. We have a great clientele. We don't need a player to turn pro in the next 6 months to keep the lights on with our group. So that just gives families an assurance that you do it when the time is right.
Yeah, you're there for the right reasons, for sure. Yeah. With the growth of the women's pro game and just seeing some, how the media's finally brought him on board and they're doing some great things in terms of marketing and the stadiums are being full. I think some of the record crowds just recently out in Toronto and Montreal and places like that. The women's game and the salaries that they are now being paid still are minuscule to what the NHL athlete would be getting, but there's a real importance for them to get sponsorship, from other businesses to come in and sponsor that athlete. Is that something that you see more now with both men and women in hockey, that they're making just as much money away from their NHL contracts and their pro women's contracts from sponsorships, or is that something that's still in the works?
I'm not overly familiar with the numbers on the women's side. Certainly on the men's side with NHL players, most players would not receive much or anything, Barrett, off of the ice. For sort of the regular 800,000, 850, $1 million player who's playing on the third or fourth line, in a sort of regular marketplace. I don't think there's much really for those players off the ice. Certainly for the household name players in strong markets,
Right.
they would have something regionally, certainly, and in some cases nationally or even internationally. But you could probably count on one hand how many players at this moment are endorsing a certain product, right? You see them on a national ad campaign. There's not that many in hockey.
Yeah.
So I think if you're a high earner in the National Hockey League, your off ice dollars, even though they might be significant by women's salary standards, in pro hockey, they would pale in comparison to their contract,
right?
Their playing contract. I think the women's game, it's just about eyeballs. It's going to come down to people watching the sport, like watching them play.
Right.
And if there's interest and they get the eyeballs on the game, then everything else follows.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing there for sure. Do coaches need or have agents? It's a question I get. Like at the NHL and American League level, is that something that, there's the coaches have you take care of their business as well?
They do have agents in some cases. Not every coach or manager would have an agent. Some would choose to go it alone. Others would have an agent and do have agents. We, as certified NHLPA player agents, cannot represent managers and coaches. There's a conflict of interest there with doing so. So registered player agents with the NHLPA are forbidden from representing coaches and managers. But yes, there are some coaching agents that are quite active and have an impressive book of clients.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. I think that conflict of interest piece is I think a lot of times we forget that there's other people other than the players that are in the game, right? Like obviously coaches, managers, but even you get down to your doctors and your therapists and your equipment managers. There's so many people that are on that other side of the game that they get forgotten about sometimes too. But they nonetheless they need representation, and they go about it in each of their own ways. So it's good to see that happening. The next segment that we have in our podcast is a segment that we call Guide and Provide, where we ask our guests to give us a piece of advice or a nugget for players, for parents, and then for coaches. So let's start off with the players. Let's do it in twofold for yourself. Let's see some advice from yourself for a young athlete, like we'll call it a bantam draft player level. Like what would be a piece of advice for that young athlete? And then also for, a guy that's in the Western League that is maybe past, like he's a 20-year-old and he's missed the draft, and maybe some advice you'd give for him.
Okay, sure. So we'll start with the young player. So again, like we've talked about, it's kind of been the theme of our conversation here, is just be patient, just enjoy the game. You're young, you're a kid, you're young, not even a young man quite yet. You're a kid, you should be going to the rink and having fun and being a good teammate, and certainly working hard and just loving the game. Go to the rink for the right reasons. Don't be looking in the stands to see, who's there, and worried about draft lists and things like that. A healthy exercise for young players to look at a draft list that came out 10 years ago and see where, we won't recognize many of the names that were very good prospects, that were highly rated, et cetera. It really is about going to the rink and becoming better every day. Yeah. It's cliche, but you go to the rink, you work, you get better every day, and you come back tomorrow and you do the same thing all over again. So that's the young player.
Yeah.
The 20-year-old who's maybe exiting junior hockey, doesn't have maybe what he set out to accomplish in terms of a contract offer, and he's disappointed with that, and he's looking at maybe the next steps as a compromise or even a failure, saying, well, gee, I got to go to university play, and it doesn't really interest me. It's not what I wanted to do. There's many examples over the years of players who have played Canadian university hockey. Actually just got off the phone before this talk with you with an NHL team about one of our players who is a U Sports player that the team is interested in signing. And they've presented him with a very nice opportunity. He was a major junior player. He didn't have what he, had set out for at 20, but now he's 23 and he does. So again, you just keep getting better every day, which he's done. And you go and you make the most of it. You work towards your degree. You become a good teammate. You become a better player. Look at 23 coming out of U Sports, you're going to be a better player than 20 coming out of major junior. That's just reality.
For sure.
So I think it's just about keeping your eyes on the prize. Yeah,
that's great advice, and I love hearing that. That U Sport is continuing to produce players. I think I've always said this, is that the U Sport level of hockey is the best kept secret in the game. The level of competition, the physicality, the level of coaching that you get across the country is unbelievable. And I think it's a great pathway. It's that missing step that players sort of overlook and miss out on. So I really like that analogy or that example that you've given us, that there's even current players right now, as they're in the midst of their playoff runs, that are going to get those opportunities to take that next step into the pro level. What advice would you give to parents? And maybe let's have that advice again for those same age groups. What advice would you give to a parent of a young player that's looking into the bantam draft, and then to a set of parents that they're maybe disappointed as they have lived vicariously through their son or daughter, and they haven't made it to the NHL, and they're trying to figure out, should I go to the East Coast? Should I go to Europe? What should I be doing?
Yeah, I think for the young player, Barrett, it's the parent is really the advisor or the agent, aren't they? At a young age. I mean, they're the one. They're heavily invested, involved. They've been the one talking to coaches over the years and coordinating skating coaches and summer development and doing all of those coordinated efforts, if you will, for those players over the years. And you're starting to get to an age where the parent is more of or becomes more of just a taxi driver, like taking them to the rink and taking them to the gym. And I think just encouraging the player, keeping it positive, talking them off the ledge, if you will, at times, right? The worst thing for a young player is when the parent is all worked up and is concerned about lists and so on. That's not healthy or productive. I think it's just maybe referencing some current examples, where, I mean, looking at players in the NHL who were never drafted in major junior drafts, didn't get a scholarship offer till they were 20. Maybe they even walked on, and had to pay. And then, I mean, just for me personally, when I played at Northeastern, our captain, my senior year, like our captain, one of our best players, was a walk-on. He came and tried out for the team and made the team, and it took him some time, and eventually he got better and better, and became a regular and a full scholarship player.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's that for the young player. For the older player, maybe exiting junior, again, it's go get your degree, become a better hockey player. Your hockey career is far from over. You are not done. This is another step in your development now. You go and you approach it the same way, with the same seriousness, the same diligent approach to get better every day. You use the resources at the university. You're working in the gym, you're doing video, you're learning from your coach, you're becoming a better hockey player. You will have just as good or better opportunities for you when you exit there than you had when you were exiting major junior.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. Now, in terms of what we're looking for advice from an agent, is with a coach that's got a player. You're say it's on a U15 team or even a Western League team, and you've got a Connor Bedard on your roster, or in a U15 you've got a young Dumont that's on your team, and he's going to be unbelievable. Probably first overall pick, or sorry, DuPont. As a coach for those young guys, what would you encourage the coaches to be communicating or working with those young guys about?
What would I have them, the coach, the messaging that I'd want the coach to reinforce for an elite young player like that?
Yeah.
I'd probably say my biggest concern, whether I'm the parent or the advisor, or it would be the headspace that player's in. If they like to keep them grounded, in other words, and that they still have to continue to work hard. They're sort of not above, the process that every player has to go through, Barrett, to become elite at the next level. I think there is a concern with young players getting recognized early, receiving all sorts of accolades, having an agent expressing interest, or many agents being talked about. The ego can get out of control,
For sure, yeah.
and they can they can become distracted, and it can honestly, in some cases, be the kiss of death.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen that, especially when you get a team full of hot potential players, right? And they've all got that ego, and they start crashing into each other, and all of a sudden they're playing selfishly and not as a team and as a unit, and they can quickly fall down the draft list in a hurry, can they not?
That's right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The last segment that we have on our podcast each week is a segment called Grandpa B's Story Time. And I don't necessarily have a story other than, I've had the opportunity to be on the inside as a chaplain and working with some teams over the years and with some of these elite level athletes. And I've seen some great things happen, because their managers and their agents have really helped navigate some things for them. And they've even, done a great job advocating for their mental health and stuff like that. So I think that there's, I think it's just a really good spot for young athletes to make sure they've got someone that really they can count on. That's more than just getting them a tryout, but it's making sure that your agent or your advisor truly does care about you. Is there any story over the last number of years, whether it's with some of your former, guys that have now retired, like Hossa and Mike Fisher and the Primos and those guys, or is there any maybe newer stories with like the Bertuzzis and the Hymans that you're working with that you would say, here's a situation where a young guy came in and he struggled with this. We surrounded him with some great mental health support. We got him the training he needed, and look at where he's landed now. Is there anyone that's in your stable that you've worked with over the last 20 plus years?
There is. I mean, I think it's important for the viewers to not lose sight of the fact that these are just people, right? They're just regular people that we're dealing with. They have the same problems, the same concerns. They're just a reflection of the greater population. So I think when we're dealing with such a cross section of people, like we deal with some numbers, right, Barrett? We have quite a few clients and have over the years. We've sort of seen it all when it comes to these concerns, these issues, these matters, and I would say they're even more magnified when you're a pro athlete, because you have a bit of a dangerous combination, if you will. You have a lot of money. You have a lot of free time, and you have you're enabled, if you will, right? You have a lot of maybe the bar owner is going to shut down the bar, but he's going to keep it open for you guys because you're the team,
Right.
or you're a group of athletes, and it's just sort of more opportunity to get into some problems off the ice.
Yeah.
And that's one issue, is issues off the ice, but just when it comes to that large umbrella that we call mental health, there's a lot of pressure in this game.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. You're away from home, you're on the road, the coach is hard on you, you didn't play, or you didn't play much, or you let one in from center ice. That was the game-winning goal. And, there's some harsh fans out there. There's some critical comments, and it's mentally fatiguing and draining. And, we're all human. You can start to feel crushed under that sort of pressure eventually. So I think it's really important to have support around you, people who do care. A player needs to feel like, hey, I can open up to my agent. He's a friend. We get told things that first, before parents, before wives or girlfriends, in a lot of cases, about things that are going on, like honest things that are going on in a player's life.
Right.
Whether it's a vice kind of issue, or it's just anxiety and pressure or depression. I think most people would think, hey, these guys got it made. They're playing in the show and they're making lots of money, and they're, staying in nice hotels and they wear nice suits, and, life is good. It's not always the case. So, I probably won't get into one specific example, but we've had so many over the years, and quite honestly, that's the most rewarding part of the business for me. It has been, helping these young men get to the finish line, right? Well, like do well throughout their careers, and, goals, assists, those they come and go, but to make sure that they accomplished what they did, they had the support network around them to really accomplish what they set out to do, is hugely gratifying. Because when a player is on the wrong path, it can end pretty quickly for them. And it's a real wasted opportunity, and that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we've seen probably real recently, right, in the last year to 2 years, that there's a lot of criticism out there that hockey's got a really bad culture. And that's at points there for sure is some of those, bad, just bad situations that they're either still hidden or they're starting to come out and bubbling to the surface and whatnot. But I've been in the game long enough, just as you have, to know that there are some really, really good people still in the game. And there's some great coaches, there's great managers, there's great agents, there's still great players that are legit trying to do their best and making sure that everyone gets to the finish line. Because they are influencers. They're people that carry weight in their communities. They carry weight across the nation for their sport. And a lot of times we only hear about the bad stuff, right? And we think all of a sudden everyone paints the whole sport of hockey with that brush that, it's a bad culture. But I know firsthand, as well as you do, because you're working in the trenches with those guys, they're managing there's a pressure that's there, but they're managing it well because they're great leaders. And they're willing to take care of their mental health. They're willing to, sit down and have hard conversations. So I really appreciate hearing you and your agency doing that work with your players. I think it's a real powerful statement.
Thank you.
One last story for me, I guess, would be a Grandpa B story time that might kind of, it's an old school name, and we're going to have him on the next podcast with Dean McCammon, who, he played 3 games shy of 1,000 games in the NHL. And I remember one year, at a hockey camp with Dino. We're up in Edmonton. He was playing with the Oilers at the time. And he got up and, talked about his journey through hockey and how he, went through junior and got drafted. And his first game was against Mary Lemieux and all this other great stuff. And then he sat down afterwards, and there's this lineup, like all these kids, 125 kids just come running to him wanting to sign a piece of paper, right? Get Dean's autograph. And I'll never forget it. Dean just sat there and he paused as just as nice as he possibly could. He just said to the kids in this sort of, uncle type way, he said, "Hey guys, listen, do you really want this ink on that piece of paper? Or would you rather be able to tell your friends 10 years from now that I got to sit down and have a conversation with Dean McCammon?" And it was just amazing. The instant those kids just sat down, like, really? Like, I get to sit down and talk to an NHL player? And sometimes we lose sight of these guys that they just want to sign autographs, but there are good dudes out there that are willing to take the time to say, "Hey, let's make this a little bit more than just ink on paper, and then let me give you a better story than that autograph will ever tell."
Yeah, that's great. That's a cool story. Kind of a shame. 3 games shy of 1,000. I mean, he could always skate so well. Maybe he could come back and find a way to get in 3 games. That's.
Well, I'll make sure he gets your number when I talk to him tomorrow, because I think he would love to have that silver stick hanging over his fireplace mantle one day. Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, it just seems wrong, doesn't it, to be that close?
Bit of an unfortunate ending for him, but he's still a great guy that continues to give back to the game and is a real good dude, right? So looking forward to having him on a next podcast. He's going to be a great guest, just as you've been, Todd. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know you got a lot on your plate in terms of just, with your family, with, your business and everything else that's going on. It's a busy time of the year. So I do appreciate you coming on to the show today. I think we've learned a lot. I know I've learned a lot in terms of just getting some of those, those finer points that I can now pass on to people, whether they're listening to the podcast or whether they have a chance to see us at the rink or come and talk to us at the academy. I think we'll have some good wisdom now to pass on to them. I really appreciate that.
No, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Barrett. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the best to you, and look forward to chatting with you again in the rink somewhere soon.